Here's a rundown of my front end rebuild. This isn't going to be a step-by-step, but I will go over some torque specs and stuff like that, some part numbers. So if this is something you're interested in doing, watch through this. I give some helpful tips that I learned along the way that weren't out there on some other videos on YouTube. So good luck on your project. Thanks. Well, yeah, I've had the Sequoia since 2016. Figured it's time to keep it for the long haul and go ahead and change some stuff. So these are Spider Tracks wheel spacers, 1.25 inches. One set of these only comes with a pair, so if you're going to buy these, you have to buy a pair for the front and a pair for the back. These help with larger tires, and a lot of people complain that these increase the wear and tear of the front end components, and while that may be true, it's no worse than getting an offset set of rims. It's exactly the same. And make sure you get the hub centric ones, and if I were going to get some, I would definitely get the Spider Tracks. Don't get some cheap knockoff ones. Moving over, lower ball joints. This is a major fail point. For anyone watching this, I would highly suggest getting OEM. You can get the part numbers off of here. Just pause the video if you need. This is for a 2004 Toyota Sequoia. They beefed these up in the life cycle of the Sequoia. In the early generation, but pre-facelift, they had some thinner style of these, and they had a recall, and most of them got changed out, but you might just want to check to see if yours has an open recall for these, because you might be able to get these replaced for free if the recall hasn't been done yet. These are the bolts with the flange. I would definitely suggest getting a new set of bolts for the lower ball joints, because they have been known to be weak as after you remove them. They're supposed to be one-time use, so check these out. I highly suggest getting a new set of those as well. The left and the right, I actually purchased these in 2016 when I purchased the Sequoia, and they were supposed to have been installed at the same time that I got my Toy Tech lift installed. However, the guy had forgotten to put these on, and the ones that were on there were still pretty decent, so I just saved these and figured I'd just put them on eventually. Here I am 5 years later, and I still have yet to put these on, but I figured this is actually kind of what got me started going ahead to do everything else. These are the inner tie rod ends, and these are not cheap, and if there's quite a few other companies that offer these at a much cheaper price, but again, my Toyota has 275k miles, so if the stock stuff lasted me that long, I'm willing to pay a little bit extra money now and not have to worry about it ever again. So again, here are the part numbers. These are the boots for the steering rack. You can see different part numbers. This is the clamp for those boots. Goes up around here. And I actually purchased an SPC upper control arm when I did my Toy Tech lift. So the upper ball joints are only about 4 years old. However, I absolutely did not ever maintain them, didn't put any grease in them ever, so I figured if I'm going to go ahead and spend the money on everything else right now, I might as well go ahead and get some new ball joints and plan on having a regular maintenance schedule on them. The thing that's cool about these is they are adjustable. Alright, we're in the middle of taking this passenger side apart. Got the caliper up, rotor off, got some of the tie rod end out, got this ABS line out as well. I'm not going to go over how I did all this. There's videos on YouTube that go over more in depth about each thing, but just going to take you guys along the process. So the goal here is to change the bearing on the front end, as well as change basically outer tie rod, inner tie rod, the bushings on the steering rack, and both ball joints on each side. So Stick with me. I had an issue getting this cover even separated from the actual hub. You can see I kind of dented it in a little bit right there. That's the only way I could figure out how to get this off. I don't think this has ever been opened up. This has got 270,000 miles on it, so I'm sure this is probably the first time this has ever been removed from the hub. But just keep in mind, I'm gonna straighten this out once I get the cover off to kind of mitigate that. But this cover inside looks brand new, so it definitely did its job. 270,000 miles, tolerance was so perfect, didn't even get freaking dust inside. Well, I was tearing apart everything, and I noticed that the CV boot was torn. Very common problem on these. I thought I had checked these before I ordered everything, so obviously I didn't have anything ordered for that. But called Toyota, my local Toyota dealership. It's going to be like $680 for one CV axle assembly. The CVs are the axle assemblies are the same for the left or right side of the vehicle, and not only are they $680, but there's a national back order, and there's like 180 people that are waiting currently to get their CV assembly. So I started looking for something else, and on the TSOR, Texas Sequoia off-road group on Facebook, there was somebody who posted something quite a bit back talking about the high angle CV boots, which I almost got for this update. But in his explanation of the different choices to go with, he mentioned CVJ axle, which is a Colorado company, and they rebuild Toyota axles with the high angle boots and stuff. So I went ahead and bought the highest angle, the best CVs that they sell. It's 540 for both right and left axles with the high angle boots, but that's after the core charge. So you do have to pay $85 per side for the core charge. So it actually, the initial fee is like $750, which that's with shipping and everything, but you get $85 per side back whenever you send yours back in. So anyway, sucks that I came across this, but that's how it is working on a vehicle. This bolt on the SPC upper ball joints is a 22 millimeter, and this one down here on the stock lower ball joint is a 24 millimeter. Just about done to pull the knuckle out. As they say, more heat, a bigger bar, or a bigger hammer. I couldn't get the top of the bolt of the SPC upper ball joints off, so bigger bar. Well, in Isaac Spoon fashion, just like everything automotive, I was pressing the hub out of the bearing, and the bearing didn't want, it got about halfway through, and then the bearing decided to just grab onto the freaking hub. So it took me a while to even get it to this point. The bearing tore in half. Then once I got the hub out, this ring, you can see, is toast. This is basically what clips the bearing in, but you have to take the hub out before you can get to that clip. And then finally, I was following the 1A Auto instructions, where they use the rotor. They place this inside and then they press the bearing out this way. Well, of course, the freaking rotor breaks. Fun times. The old bearing literally just freaking got trashed. I don't know why the hub was so glued to this bearing. Half of the bearing got stuck on the hub. I was worried I was gonna have to get a new hub. I decided to try and carefully use my cutoff wheel and pried it off. Went to cut towards the end, really thin metal, and it worked, luckily. All right, let me tell you guys. So both of these are rented from O'Reilly. 67213. This is a master wheel hub and bearing remover and installer kit. Only a few pieces out of this actually work with the Sequoia stuff. Then also this ball U-joint press set. This has the size sleeve that you need, 67045. This is like $160 to rent, and that's like it's like $420 to rent that. You get all that money back, but in my opinion, these are both needed. Let me show you. So these pieces come out of the $400 kit, and the way that you set this up, so the hub, this is how the hub is. It's basically all the way down in there like that. To press it out, this side will be flipped over, kind of like that. And the hub will be sitting in here. Well, you need this large sleeve kind of come around to sit on top of like that. So pretty much to start the press out, you're gonna need the large sleeve up on top with the bolts resting on it, and then this kind of cage pressing it up, kind of supporting it. And then your 35 millimeter axle socket will fit right in there. So you start pressing it out, and then you can only get so far, you can only get the hub so far down before the wheel studs start affecting you right here. So then the hub is going to be about halfway out of the bearing right here. Then you pretty much have to move this sleeve. It was up here. You got to take it off and set it in so the bearing is basically pressing up against this, and then the wheel hub, that gives you enough space for the wheel hub to press out right here. So it's a freaking pain. The first bearing and hub that I pressed out, the bearing basically freaking split in half, and half of the bearing was still attached to the hub, and I had to cut the half the bearing off. It was a nightmare. Took freaking hours to even get it to where I could put the new bearing in. So if you use both of these kits like I mentioned and do it how I showed you, basically the bolts that hold this sheath on, you're gonna start kind of like that and use those bolts to press up against here. Press the hub about halfway out, and then you're gonna have to basically take this off, lift the whole assembly up, and slide this so the bearing is literally pressing up against this plate as you press it the rest of the way down. The only items you'll use from the smaller kit are these two items right here. And basically you want to use this when you want to press the old bearing out after you finish removing everything else. You can press this up against the inner part of the bearing. But anytime you're not wanting to just press the inner part of the bearing, everything else can be used from the other kit. You can see I'm using the sleeve and a little base to keep it up as I'm going to press the new bearing in from up here. All right, fast forward a week later, I got the CVJ axle kit. These are the best ones that they sell. This whole thing is $270 and has an $85 core charge. You got to send these back, and they have to be Toyota. So let's look at the inner boot right here, which is the one that broke. The way that these break, especially when you lift it and you have a higher angle, is the axle sits at a higher angle than stock, and as this turns, right, these little splines, they push together, it creates friction and produces heat, which makes the actual crease, like right in here, start to heat up and then break eventually. So the difference between this one and this one is, one, it's longer, so it basically breaks up that angle over a longer section of boot than this. You can see the boot on this one is only this long. And on top of that, this top one has a little bead inside to kind of help separate. So you see when I bend it, it kind of helps keep the boot from touching itself. So in theory, these should last a lot longer than these without anything puncturing it or whatever, just because it longer width and they're made for a higher ankle. So yep, gonna throw these in. Got one for each side. Also, you see this little tube that's there to basically mitigate any kind of air pockets or anything that might be inside, and you're supposed to remove it once you get back to normal ride height. So don't forget, if you get these CVJ axles, pull that little tube out. Another thing worth mentioning, these bolts that hold the lower ball joint on, you should only use these once. I'm not sure if that's a Toyota specification or not, but I've read several people online talking about these bolts shearing off whenever they reuse them. So just as an added safety precaution, these are like $1 or $2 each, so you know, an extra $8 on each side is worth it in my opinion, having to like repair this on the trail and you don't have these bolts. So I'm actually going to keep these bolts I just took off as my backups because I didn't drive on them. I just backed it out of the garage with these on. However, I did buy some new ones. This is the part number up here, and make sure you get the ones with the flange on it. There's two different styles, and if they don't look like this, then don't get them. These are the ones you need. Another helpful tip, you can see the red Loctite on those. It's a gel. I actually like the gel better than the normal Loctite liquid. Permatex makes a blue and a red gel, so in my opinion I think it's better. Now it's time to put everything back together. You want to go ahead and tighten this up. Basically, once the bolts are back in the lower ball joint and you got everything where you want it, you want to tighten this up. Torque specs for this are 173 foot-pounds. The torque specs for this nut on the lower ball joint, connecting it to the control arm, is 103 foot-pounds. Like I was mentioning before about using the flanged bolts here, the torque specs on these are 59 foot-pounds. However, if you have the other style bolts, I've seen a few people online who have the black non-flanged bolts and they torque them to 59 and it stretches the bolt. So some people say to torque those to 49. I'm going to go ahead and torque these to 59. And I have, like I said, I have an extra set that I just took off I can use if needed, but I think 59 pounds will be fine. The upper ball joint torque specs, this is an SPC upper ball joint. It says to just use factory torque specs, which is 77 foot-pounds. And something to note, this is the old style insert right here for the SPC. They actually had swapped it, so if you get these SPC uppers now, this is currently January 2021, I think everything in the last year or two that's been from SPC, this insert, this little silver insert here, is actually reversed. So make sure you read the instructions on how to insert it in the correct way. If you have some form of greasable upper ball joint, like this SPC or some other aftermarket ones, make sure you grease it. Most of them I don't believe come greased, so just read the instructions and follow that. Also something, it's good to grease these every time you get your oil changed. The old ones I had, I never greased. I drove them for 70,000 miles, which is not a good idea. So don't forget, these are serviceable upper ball joints, which is why these are more appealing than stock. So take care of them, unlike I did. All right, got the old inner and outer tie rods out. The way these are put in. So when it's installed in the vehicle, you're going to see this little washer. You're going to see how thin that area is. The way that this is going to be screwed in, so this is going to be the side that's closest to the engine. So screw in like this, and this is a lock washer here. So there's two little tabs you can see on the back right here. Those go in to those two little tabs right there on the shaft. So once it's screwed in all the way that this works is you pretty much bend the washer over part of this nub here to lock it in place. Well, as you could see, once it's screwed in, that is not very wide for how big of a nut this is. So I saw online that some people were using a 1 5/8, which I got. However, you could see it doesn't really fit in that way. So if you read that, don't get this 1 5/8. Secondly, look how narrow that lip is compared to what most of these large crescent wrenches or any kind of normal tool that would fit over there. I do know that Stanley makes a narrow, wide mouth crescent wrench, which I don't know if it'll fit in there or not. However, I just purchased this little chain vice grip tool. It's very helpful in these large inner tie rods, because you can see the gap right here is not very wide for these large wrenches to even fit in without having to like bend all this back. You know, there's a few other tie rod end tools you can rent that are big enough, but the ones that are a clamp style, that basically is like a U-bolt that goes through a channel and then you screw in 2 bolts and it uses a tension. Those are usually too small for this Sequoia. So I just tightened it down, clamped it down. This chain vice grip worked like a dream. And once you got it tightened in, then you want to come back here and basically bend the edge of this lock washer over 2 faces of the actual tie rod. And as you can see, I actually did add some extra grease in there, just why not? So here are all the part numbers for the inner outer tie rods, the boot, and the clamp. So this is the part number 45503-09240 for the inner tie rods. These are the same for each side. Here are the parts for the right hand and left hand outer tie rods. Here is the hose clamp part number, and that is what goes on the end of this boot right here, which goes up over and clamps to the steering rack. And here's the actual part number to the boot. And we're going to reuse the clamp that goes on this end of the, right here, goes on this end of the boot. Torque specs for this, 51 foot-pounds. Make sure you line up the castle nut with the hole. And it's easier if you align the hole of the actual tie rod so it's pointing straight out to you, just for future use. So yeah, don't be like me and forget to put everything on in here before you screw in the tie rod. I had to take everything apart, put it back on. So this side is done. I got this poly bushing set. I don't know if that's the part number. I got it several weeks back. It's from AutoZone. I think I paid like 20 or 30 bucks for it. The way you want to take these out, there's videos online showing more specifically on these, but this bushing basically was right here. You want to get a sharp, once you get all this hardware out, once you get a sharp razor and cut basically like this flap off, and then once you get the rack out, you can use like a socket or something and basically tap out this bushing coming out this way. And when you, same thing for this bushing as well. However, this bushing, when you get a kit, you can see that gold washer right there. So the factory hardware is a 1-piece bushing, and the actual metal piece has a fat washer on the back, like basically the metal sleeve and the washer 1 piece. But these bushings are a 2-part bushing, so you basically, it's split in the middle, and then you put half of the bushing in from this side and the other half in from this side. But when you tighten it down, you cannot forget to put this washer on the cross member side. Hope you enjoyed the video. Just chilling on the bed here letting my old bones rest after crawling around on the concrete like I'm not used to doing. So hope you found some useful information on that. Thanks again for the support, and like and subscribe helps the channel out.